This is Healthcare Now Radio's Interviews Now. Thanks for listening in. I'm Carol Flagg, your host for today's episode. You can follow our show at #InterviewsNOW and join the conversation and follow Healthcare Now Radio at HC Now Radio. In this fast-paced, ever-changing landscape we call healthcare delivery, who can we trust to tell us the good, the bad, what's happening now? We're here to help you sort out these issues with thought leaders in the know. On this episode, we talk with Gerry Blass, the founder and CEO of ComplyAssistant, and John Gomez, the CEO and founder of Sensato. On our conversation today, we will focus on the critical issue of medical device security. Gerry, John, thanks so much for taking time out today to talk about this topic.
You're welcome, Carol. Look forward to it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, great to have you. So first of all, before we begin, tell our audience a little bit about yourselves, how you founded your respective companies. Gerry, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, ComplyAssistant grew out of my experience being a CISO at a New Jersey health system. And after I left there, I started with ComplyAssistant, mainly conducting audits that were pre-HIPAA at the time, back in 2002. And then through the years, we decided to develop a GRC web portal to help us to conduct audits and to also help our clients to have a GRC portal for their own use to better manage compliance and HIPAA and cyber and all the healthcare-related regulatory requirements in a more efficient way, as opposed to a unstructured Excel or Word document. And so we've had the web portal available since 2009, and we've been steadily growing clients, partners, and making deploys consistently to the software to make it enhanced to the point where it is today, including we even have a new mobile app for audits, which are gaining a lot of traction from the standpoint of making audits of, let's say, HIPAA, facility security audits, patient safety rounds, department quality audits, more efficient, pretty much cutting the time in half. So we just continue to try to make progress with our GRC, and we also offer services for HIPAA audits, information privacy and security audits that get delivered within our portal.
John, how about you?
Yeah, so I've been involved in technology pretty much my entire life, but I'll spare you the overall biography. I was president and chief technology officer at Allscripts through 2011. I left there and founded Sensato in 2013. And so Sensato really is focused on healthcare cybersecurity. We kind of are a little bit unique in our view. We kind of take an attacker's perspective to kind of how we do things. In working with Gerry, we've kind of founded the Medical Device Cybersecurity Task Force, which is an open source task force that focuses on medical device security and tactics. As a company, we offer assessments and pen testing and incident response planning. We also have a security operations center that we work on behalf of our clients under their networks, and we also have a software product called Nightingale, which is a breach detection system. But that's kind of us, the back of the napkin kind of overview.
Great. So set the stage here for our listening audience. What is the definition or what constitutes a medical device?
And so, medical device is really any equipment, apparatus, appliance, or software that is for diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, treatment, or alleviation of disease. This is just in high-level general. But to get a little more granular, so from a diagnostic standpoint, you have medical imaging machines to aid in diagnosis. Examples are ultrasound, MRI machines, PET, CT scanners, and X-ray machines. Just some examples. Treatment equipment includes things like infusion pumps, medical lasers, and LASIK surgical machines. When you talk about life support equipment used to maintain a patient's bodily function, this includes medical ventilators, incubators, anesthetic machines, heart-lung machines, ECMO, and dialysis. I'm just going down the list kind of quickly, but medical monitors allow medical staff to measure a patient's medical state. Monitors may measure patient vital signs and other parameters, including ECG, EEG, and blood pressure. There's medical laboratory equipment, which automates or helps analyze blood, urine, genes, and dissolved gases in the blood. getting to the end here. So diagnostic medical equipment may also be used in the home for certain purposes for the control of diabetes. And then you have therapeutic, physical therapy machines like continuous passive range of motion CPM machines. So that's just the list that I have. And John, did you, is that comprehensive enough? Did you want to add to that?
No, I think that's a great overview of kind of the space and what constitutes the medical devices.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a big list, obviously, encompassing a lot of different areas in the healthcare world. And obviously with the adoption of electronic health records over the last 8 to 10 years and the industry's march towards full interoperability, the impact of security on medical devices is a growing concern out there in the industry. So let's talk about that. What is creating this concern around medical devices? Let's start with that.
Yeah, and I'll just start high level, and John's going to get into more granular. But, basically years ago, whether it's 10 years ago or longer, the medical devices were really separate from IT and in the clinical engineering or biomedical department. Many of the devices were standalone. Some of them didn't even have access controls for credentialing, user IDs and passwords. Some of them didn't store patient data, so that reduced risk. But for the most part, they were not connected to the network. They were standalone, except for some of the equipment. And so the risk of unauthorized access under that scenario is rather low because it's really not accessible to somebody from the outside. And this, especially even before, the networks and internet and all that stuff came along. But certainly over the years, these devices became connected. And so once they become connected, any of the vulnerabilities that did not have a high risk when they weren't connected, now all of a sudden can become high vulnerability and risk and subject to attack and potential breach. Now, even with some known risks, many vendors cannot mitigate or their clients cannot mitigate their operating system risk because of the tight link to the operation. So it was almost like a hard-coded environment where even if there's a vulnerability scan identifying the need for patches or upgrades for security for devices for their operating systems, the vendors were kind of hard-coded. So they actually could not assist with clients upgrading their OS to become more secure, mainly because the functionality of the application could be impacted. And that was certainly, commonplace. And so here you are connecting devices that in a scan of vulnerability will come up with a red flag on their level of operating system and the insecure nature of it. But the vendors would say, and we have observed this in many cases, that they could not do anything about it because they would need to do major changes to their functionality of their application. So with that, and I'm sure John can talk about how that's coming along now, but the bottom line is that really with any kind of PHI in any kind of location, organization must consider risk of unauthorized access, whether it's Wi-Fi, email, servers, workstations, portable devices, copiers, whatever the category is. Medical devices is definitely a major consideration, top of the list. To not do so can be considered negligence, especially due to the number of incidents and potential for more incidents caused by medical devices that have weak security controls, and there's nothing more attractive to an attacker than weak security controls, finding the weakest link to get into a network and then to go from there.
John?
Yes, I mean, building kind of what Gerry talked about, this inherent lack of security in devices. And, again, when we talk about devices, many organizations are expecting to keep these devices in inventory 10, 20 years. And it's very similar to the problem NASA faces where when they build a rocket, it takes 10, 20 years to kind of build. So you have technology that's very old. And some of that's being dealt with as we see new devices come out, but the propensity of devices in the hospital's inventory are, like Gerry said, vastly insecure. The second, kind of piece of this is that we've seen a dramatic change in the last 2 or 3 years of who is actually, the enemy when we think about, who would attack a hospital. 3 years, 5 years ago, we were talking about hackers. And, there's probably an image or imagery that comes to mind when we think of that word hacker. And that's changed, right? Today we have attackers. We're seeing that our electoral systems are being attacked by highly sophisticated cyber spies and nation states. And we now have cyber terrorists, and we have cyber criminals. We're very well funded, very well educated, and that didn't exist years ago. So that landscape has changed. You have insecure devices and now a set of actors who are very good at attacking things. And then if you add to that, like a couple of weeks ago, we had one of the first really public attacks that occurred, known as Orange Worm, and they actually infiltrated hospitals through X-ray devices and imaging devices, and then were able to gain access to other areas of the hospital. So many times, we're not just seeing people attack medical devices for the purpose of creating, an issue with the medical device themselves. Often they're attacking the devices because they know they're not secure, but yet they're connected to hospital networks, and they can get to other parts of the hospital infrastructure through the medical devices.
So as you work with healthcare organizations, providers, in securing medical devices, what are the challenges you're seeing out there? Certainly the people factor is always an issue, right? And beyond that, what are some other things that are impacting medical device security out there that you see these challenges?
So, on the whole front, part of the challenge, Gerry kind of talked to this a little bit in the last question, is that, traditionally the IT organization and the clinical engineering or biomed, whatever the term is within the specific organization, are not even in the same reporting structure. In fact, we had a client recently that clinical engineering reports to the facilities group. And I don't know how that makes sense, but you basically have somebody who's managing, your HVAC, your thermostats, and also managing the biomedical devices or medical devices. And it's not that I'm not trying to be negative about that, but, when you think about the fact that ultimately these things are full-blown computers, we're starting to see artificial intelligence introduce some to them. They're connected to networks. So the people factor is a big challenge because very often the people managing these devices really don't have a background in IT process and security and all the best practices that, kind of go with that. So the people challenge is a big one, especially because we've got an industry that really is kind of, as you put it, are kind of archaic, right? Rather than say, hey, wait a minute, we need to reorganize this. We need to move the medical device teams as part of the IT team. We just still see the politics come up. So that's a big, big challenge. The other challenge is just the complexity of the devices. We have, hospitals that on average could have 10, 20, 30,000 devices across all those different types of devices that Gerry mentioned. And so just securing those is a big deal, and having the right tools to actually create that security is a big deal. When Gerry and I have gone out and done assessments, we kind of keep finding the same information over and over. On average, a medical device will have about 6.2 vulnerabilities. If you do 6.2 times however many thousand devices you have, that's a huge number, regardless how big or small the hospital may be. You then have, add in the fact that most of these, not all the devices are not under the IT organization or IT security. Many vendors of the devices introduce their own networks, and they put warranties in place that say if you interact with that network, you void the warranties. We've got even the vendors who are some of the problems here. And then, the other thing we find on these devices is that often 60% of them in any given organization are running on operating systems that are no longer supported. We find many of them are running on Windows XP.
Yeah, right.
So that all of that complexity, kind of creates the opportunity, if you will, for what's happening.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Interviews Now, and our guests today are Gerry Blass and John Gomez, and we're talking about the critical issue of medical device security. So operating systems, people factor, probably lack of communication. There's a vendor component to all of this as well. But you guys go in and provide blueprints to overcome these challenges. Once you've implemented a process and infrastructure for medical device security, what's next? How is that maintained?
I could start with just a very high level, the best ways to maintain. So, just from a high level, it's a combination of internal controls in a hospital, let's say as an example. The hospitals can have control over their own environment. There's things they can do that John can even talk about, like segmentation of networks for medical devices, things like that. There's things they can do internally. But they're also obviously highly reliant on the vendors, which can be at times outside of their control because they have vulnerabilities. And so, the need is to understand what those vulnerabilities are and sometimes, the vendors cannot respond to it. So, from a due diligence standpoint, the hospitals are getting the answers and understanding the vulnerabilities and, working with the vendors to try to mitigate them. But in some cases, like we said before, it might be impossible to mitigate due to the impact on the functionality of the application. Solve the problems, you may have to resolve the vendor. But that is not an easy thing to do, as, it's not always easy. So it is kind of at times a catch-22.
I guess the challenge here is that we're assuming that most organizations are putting programs and practices and tech and systems in place to safeguard medical devices, and we're finding the actual opposite is true. We actually very closely with ComplyAssistant, we've come out with an entire program because of that called MD-COP that focuses on medical device cybersecurity. And the reason for that is kind of when we were out doing assessments and working with hospitals, we found that 9 out of 10 times the hospital would say to us, like, we just don't know what to do, and we're really not sure. And so we kind of took everything we learned from doing those assessments and packaged it up into one solution. And, whether you come to ComplyAssistant or Sensato and for this or you do it on your own, the recommendations are pretty much the same, right, which is you have to put in a medical device cybersecurity policy. Many hospitals don't even have a policy around how they secure devices. You've got to do vendor assessment and really determine the risk that each vendor is providing you, and that's a very big problem for hospitals. And they may have 100, 200 vendors, and they have to score them, but it's got to get done. You do need to segregate these devices onto a separate network, like Gerry said, and that could take 2 to 3 years to do. It's a complex process that's resource intensive and capital intensive, which we know is not abundant in hospitals. You need to monitor those devices, right, to understand, has somebody got in the network? Are they attacking your devices? Because ultimately there are diagnostic and life support devices that could become compromised. And then, on top of all that, you need some kind of last line of defense, such as a honeypot or something like that. And it's amazing because, we'll go out and talk or do presentations like this, and sometimes we're in front of, a couple hundred people at an event, and many of them will come up afterwards and say, you guys are kind of the first ones that have really given us a checklist, and we just didn't have that. And we think we have that, but we really don't. And it's not really difficult, right? The checklist is 4 or 5 items, but they're challenging to get pulled off. And so unfortunately, even thinking like, well, what do they do beyond that foundation? We haven't even built the foundation yet to protect these devices. And so, there's still just a lot of room for people to put the right things in place. And then kind of after that, I think everything Gerry talked about is spot on, which is ongoing assessment, ongoing evaluation, ongoing education, security awareness. It's many of the things that we would talk about, as part of any HIPAA or NIST 853 assessment program.
Yeah. John, you mentioned earlier in the conversation AI playing a role here. Where does artificial intelligence and automation come into play to help streamline this process?
So, I think that's the AI I was referring to is actually in the use of diagnostics, and we're seeing some of that play in. But, I think interestingly, we're not seeing a lot of machine learning and AI on the defense side, right, as cybersecurity defenders. As a company, we're doing stuff there. It's probably about a year away, but we are looking at machine learning. What's really interesting, though, is that the attackers are using machine learning and AI, right? And they're starting to do that. And so it's kind of, again, we're back to that, hey, we're behind the 8 ball again. So I think, sadly, there's not a lot of great examples of how that's being used. I could give tremendous examples of how it should be. The stark reality is that the attackers are only, they're doing it already, and that's not good.
So let's talk about the risk of a breach. Perhaps some of this with healthcare organizations is, not that they don't take these sort of issues and concerns seriously, but maybe they don't understand what's at stake or what the risks are if their medical devices are compromised.
Yeah, I could talk to that, and I guess Gerry can chime in and keep me honest on it all. We speak a lot of times when we present on this stuff, we talk about something called national response theory. It's something we kind of started pioneering a few years ago, and it's really the psychology of the defender. Like, why do we know these things are at risk, but then why don't we do anything about it? And I think rational response theory plays a big role here in healthcare and medical devices. I think everybody understands the risk. We all know if a hacker or ISIS or AQM or somebody got to medical devices, that Gerry kind of gave examples of earlier, that are supporting life, right? Life support devices, diagnostic devices, and changed their operational capability, which wouldn't be that hard to do. You could kill people. You could have misdiagnosis. There could be a tremendous amount of challenges. And we speak to boards and CISOs and CEOs all the time, and they understand that. The really interesting part is when you say to them, okay, well, you got to go segregate your network, you got to do this, you got to do this, and you got to do that, then that's where it starts to fall down. And you start wondering, well, the rationale response theory, the psychology kicks in where people start saying, and I've had CISOs say to me, well, you don't really think somebody actually will do that, do you? And so I think a lot of it is just, there's a recognition of what's at stake, but the challenge is getting people to move forward. And I don't really know why. I mean, the program Gerry and I put together, you're talking $30,000 to $60,000 investment. So it's not even a lot of money to protect these things. So I don't have that answer. I wish I could. I would love to hear feedback from your listeners at some point as to why they think that, hey, they know the problem exists, but why aren't people taking concrete steps to protect them? Gerry, I don't know what else you may have on that.
Well, no, I think it's also throughout history, John, whether the issue was medical devices, or just overall HIPAA, compliance in general. One of the other problems is that the industry has basically been under-resourced from day one. Whether you're talking about people involved in the process or money in the budget, there's been limitations. So then, when you have a director of IT who is operationally responsible for running IT, and they're deemed to be the CISO, they never get to find the time to be the CISO, except for where there's an overlap on controls that are put into IT. So that's been a history of problems, and we still see it with the medical devices. When it comes to, assessing just internal in an organization, there are aspects of it, such as, wherever PHI can be located, where it can be transmitted, where it can be stored, what controls are in place. And all of a sudden you introduce medical devices, which could range from anywhere from 10 to hundreds to maybe even, 500 or more. So now you have a high volume problem with limited resources. Resources don't go up, but the requirements and the scope goes way up. So how do they address it? It really touches on what John is saying. It is known that there are vulnerabilities, but it's not always properly resourced, and sometimes the responsibilities are not in the right place. Like the CISO should maybe not be reporting to IT. Maybe they should be reporting on their own or reporting to internal audit, somewhat separate from IT, makes it more unbiased in their auditing results and reporting. There's just a long way to go to really cover the increasing scope of where PHI is vulnerable today.
Yeah, I agree with you. Our listening audience too is, I'm sure, are like virtually nodding their heads that it's not that they're maybe not concerned about it, but it does become this bandwidth and resource issue. So we have a couple minutes left, and I'd love to get thoughts from each of you as to where this topic is going. The future of medical device security, I think, is probably going to get more complicated, not less, I suspect. But I'd love to hear your thoughts before we wrap up.
Okay, John, you want to start?
So, I do agree. I think things will get more complicated as new devices come out, and we're just starting to see, all kinds of, things change in terms of the venue of care, right? And so now we haven't even touched on home devices and implantables and wearables and all of that. So it will get much more complicated with time. Which it kind of brings us back to the time to do something is probably now, because it's, unfortunately, it will get more complicated, and that means more costly. If you can put that foundation in place that we talked about earlier, then at least you got to kind of step up where, you've got a place to start from. So I think, but as things evolve, I think there'll be more and more solutions on how to protect and defend those devices. But I think programs like this that raise awareness and get people to kind of stand up and say, we do need to do something and at least take a few simple steps is kind of the first monumental step towards kind of dealing with that complexity as it comes up on the horizon.
Gerry?
And, building upon the resource limitations, so, there is a need for automation here in this process. And that simply means, it's a high volume problem with medical devices. with limited resources. So how do you deal with a high volume problem? You want to deal with it with flat files like Excel or Word and send out 100, Excel spreadsheets to 100 different vendors. Try to manage that in that way. Understand, like, how do you follow up on this? How do you aggregate the data? How do you analyze the results? How do you do extensive filtering on getting to where the problem areas are to mitigate? So we do highly recommend automating the process to be able to really use an electronic approach. That kind of an approach can help you oversee and monitor as many medical device vendors that are being audited and assessed. And in a structured database, all that documentation and evidence is organized so that there is a clear evidence of due diligence. You may have a vendor that doesn't respond, but the hospital's on record as far as sending out the audit and having all kinds of indicators around what's pending, what's overdue, who's not responding. That alone is not necessarily solving the risk aspect of a vendor, but it is solving the fact that the organization is taking the steps for due diligence, and also relying on an application to automatically send alerts and notifications for what's pending and overdue, gathering evidence electronically. Really is not a project that can be managed manually anymore because of the high volume, limited resources. So we would highly recommend organizations seeking a way to automate. And in the MDCOP program, the combination of everything that Sensato does, the Plus indicator, MDCOP Plus, includes our portal. And so, we're not here to do a lot of plugs, but what we're saying is, besides our solutions, there are solutions out there that can be utilized to make this more manageable.
Gerry, John, believe it or not, we are all out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
You can learn more about Gerry Blass and John Gomez at www.ComplyAssistant.com and at www.sensato.co. Be sure to follow both companies on Twitter and on LinkedIn. As always, we thank you listeners for tuning in today. For more information about Interviews Now, visit our show's program page on www.healthcarenowradio.com. Until next time, if it's happening in healthcare and it's now, it's on Interviews Now.